Welcome to Getcha Rocks Off with Mick Wall, the world's leading rock and metal writer. Each week, he'll unpack stories that you won't find in print. So pour yourself a Jack and Coke and get ready to Getcha Rocks Off. This episode is brought to you by the Getcha Store. For all of your Getcha Rocks Off merch, including t-shirts, face masks, and yep, Hotel Tropicana coffee mugs, head over to getchastore.com.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Getcha Rocks Off.
Good evening
and welcome. I'm Mick, he's Jon, I'm Mick. Coco the Metal Pug isn't with us today, he's resting. And so, Jon, what are we talking about today?
Well, today we had sad news last week, and I mean that genuinely as sad news.
And you don't really mean much genuinely.
I don't really ever mean much.
No, let's be fair. You're not a genuine
And let's face
person.
it, most rock stars of the generation we wrote about are coming, they're nearer to the end than the beginning. I think it's fair to say.
Oh, I don't know. I feel when it comes to people like David Coverdale and
he's
Ozzy Osbourne, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Well, Sharon certainly thinks that. He's got another couple of tours in him.
Easily.
Surely, strap him to the mic. What was it? Who was it? Was it
Sharon,
Don Arden who used to
Sharon's
strap?
dad, Don Arden, who she learnt it all from. Her brother David used to call Sharon Don in a skirt.
Yeah.
He used to manage, one of the artists he managed was Gene Vincent, and Gene had this gammy leg which no one was really sure of until he came to England for the first time. He was also a chronic alcoholic that liked to carry a gun, and so Don had this thing that there was in the contract. It was as long as you turned up and you did you started the show, if there was a force majeure that occurred after that that had to cancel the show, stop the show, you still got paid.
Still got your money.
So Gene would be completely drunk and on pain pills with a gammy leg.
Holding his gun.
So he used to drag him on. I ain't going on, man, fuck you. No, come on. They'd drag him on and they'd try and get away. And they would literally gaffer tape his gammy leg to the mic stand.
So he couldn't move.
And in the back, quick, get the band. They'd come on and be like, Be-ba-paloola. Or he wouldn't even see me. And he'd fucking fall over. And they go, oh no, something's happened to Gene.
So, you're going to see
Stop the show.
The next Ozzy tour is just going to be a big cross rising up from beneath the stage with Ozzy on it.
Gaffer tape
to it. Oh, come on. Let's go mental.
Fucking crazy.
Let's go fucking crazy.
And then pass out.
And then the lights just go off and that's
end
it.
of the show.
Got your money.
Get paid.
Got your money.
You get paid. It's a shame it's not like that for this, isn't it?
Because
we could just fuck off now.
By now.
I've got a gammy leg. I've got to go.
Yeah.
You carry on,
But
John.
anyway, yes, last week, I was just on Twitter, and this is where you hear everything these days, isn't it? On, social media is ahead of everyone else. And Jim Steinman had died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jim Steinman.
72 stroke 73, not that old.
No, not at all.
Ill for some time, obviously.
I mean, they say in dog years.
Yeah.
In rock star years, quite old.
That is quite, that's right. Yeah.
Because 69 was the cut. 69, 70 is the cut.
The cut off years.
Bowie was 69.
Yeah.
Lemmy had just reached 70.
Had he? Bloody hell.
Well, he just had his 70th birthday on Christmas Eve, and I think literally 3 days later he pegged it.
Yeah.
We're still waiting for the doctor's examination note because we're not entirely sure
whether he
was dead or not before that, or may even still be walking around at the Rainbow somewhere as we speak.
Yeah, that
could be a thing.
Could happen.
That could happen.
Could happen.
Probably
Could happen with Jim. because Jim famously lived alone in a remote farmhouse somewhere in upstate New York. So upstate New York, where it kind of goes out into Vermont and all those kind of backwoods type places.
But also was only awake at night.
Yeah, I was only ever awake at night.
He used to go to bed after breakfast.
Yeah, yeah.
And then get up about 6 or 7 that
and then
evening.
through the night have these mad visions and dreams that he turned into these insane songs. And I remember him saying his other sort of great passion outside of music, one of them anyway, was wine. And no one really sort of knew about this, but did this interview with him once, and we were having lunch afterwards, and he was saying that yes, I've got this amazing collection of wine. He goes, and I write about it.
Yeah.
Because I have this book and I write in it. And he goes, if it was published, it would be the greatest book on wine ever written. And I thought, actually, you know what? It probably would, because it would be like the lyrics. It wouldn't be any of this, there's a kind of a hint of blackberry and a bit of dangleberry in the back note. It wouldn't be like
there's
that.
There's a hint of Sturm und Drang.
Yeah, it would be like, this wine is like the heavens opening and God's own hand coming,
I would drink anything that's wine, but I would not drink that.
Yeah, I mean, you don't get the impression Jim got his wine from the local supermarket,
What, he didn't go for the $3.99 Thunderbird?
I don't think. I mean, he would have done. I mean, there's a great quote from Meat Loaf where he said once, because he said Jim was he was sort of both incredibly greedy and incredibly generous, but you never knew which one you were going to get. So he might like send you round a Cadillac, or he might be eating 18 donuts, and you'd say to him, Jim, can I have one of those donuts? And he'd go, well, I don't know about that.
I've only got 18.
I'm quite hungry, yeah. So a man of, and he just one of the most eccentric but genuinely lovable people I think I've met. And you don't say that very often. And there's a few things. Once I'm coming off my long run here, once I've revved up my bike back out of Hellstar, I've got a few things to say about Jim, because he was quite something.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm bracing myself.
Into the brace position. But first of all, I'm going to set you up. No, I'm going to set you up here, because you are the author of a Meat Loaf, a very, very good, very fine, one of your finest
words. The word you're looking
works.
for there, John, is definitive.
Oh, it was definitive. I didn't know it was considered
definitive.
If it isn't considered definitive, it should be.
No,
Meat
it is.
Loaf.
No, I can assure you, it is most definitely considered.
The publisher told you. You
Very
put it on
much
put it
so.
on the back.
Well, no.
Put it on the back of the book when it becomes, the Publishing and Rights Act of 1653 says when it's written down on the back of a book, it is true.
Well, I sent a copy to Jim, and I said, I consider this definitive. What about you? And he said nothing.
Yeah, he never heard back.
Jim Steinman turned as a resounding yes.
Endorsement.
It's an endorsement.
Endorsement. So
it says on the book, in fact, the best book I've ever read, John Houghton.
Yeah,
and then
definitely.
it says definitive, Mick Wall. And then it says nothing.
Yeah, Jim Steinman.
No, let me just say.
Well, look, I'm setting you up here. Hang on, because can I just say the one important thing before we start is to say the book was about Meat Loaf, but what it did really incredibly well was to identify the fact that Meat Loaf, as we think of him, is two people, not just one. It's Marvin Lear Day of Texas, Houston, Texas, and it's Jim Steinman of New York. They come together to make this thing called Meat Loaf. Over to you.
When I interviewed Jim Steinman, I was working this out. It was about 14, 15 years after you did. And he was telling me all about his wine as well.
Did he? Did he? Yeah.
Except it was quite strange, because I'm ringing him at what for me is like, trying to think back, it's like 11 in the morning or something. And for him, it was like 4 in the morning. But there was no differentiation. This clearly for him was like 11 in the morning.
Yeah.
Except like a vampire.
He just had breakfast.
Yeah, he just...
Or brunch or something. He just had brunch.
He was in the middle of his day.
Yeah.
And he was telling me about the wine tasting thing, and he said what he said to you. You know, if it were published, I'm thinking, well, publish it. It would be amazing.
Yeah. That's the thing. I think he was one of those people, a bit like old Cove, who did tend to say the same things every time he was asked.
But that wouldn't have anything to do with the fact that he lived his life at night in the same room alone.
No,
like, you know,
I can't remember what he said.
He
to
truly
who.
was the Phantom of the Opera.
He
wasn't
really was.
Jim.
Yeah.
Jim. What?
Yeah.
You've got to eat. No, not until I finish Bat Out of Hell 12.
Yeah.
Here we go. But Jim, Meat Loaf's here to see you. Tell him go away. Yeah. So but he was. You said about that being generous or being mean. I'm talking to him. We're getting on great on the phone, and he goes, "Oh, hang on, I had a parched throat or something." He goes, "I'm just getting a sip of water." And I said, "No problem, take your time." He went, "Oh, thank you. Thank you for allowing me the time to sip some water." And I was like, "No, I didn't mean..." And I thought, oh,
yeah, he's just laying down the law.
yeah, I said, "Don't fucking sass me, Steinman."
Yeah.
With
You should
the
have just hung
fucking
up.
Total eclipse.
Just
of the
fucking hung
arse.
up.
Yeah.
Eclipse that, mate.
I said, one more like that, Steinman.
You're off.
Yeah, you and me.
You're off.
Yeah, that's finished.
Yeah. He would have backed down because he wasn't a fighter. Jim wasn't a fighter. The extraordinary thing about Steinman, I think, and his work, when you think about his work, I mean, famously, he couldn't drive, and yet he'd written Bat Out of Hell. You know, he was...
But didn't he say to you that was either you or me or someone, he said, my fantasy is to drive a motorbike to the top of...
That was at this was a video shoot. I'll quickly tell you about that interview.
You
because
jump in there, John.
Well, because it just went on for so
Jump
long.
in,
It was at
No,
the
you jump in.
It was at the time he did Pandora's Box, which was a sort of a solo record with 4 female singers interpreting this semi-concept album he'd done called Original Sin.
Everything he did was
I mean, it was
album.
massively over the top, of course. And so he'd signed to Virgin, and his press officer was Phil Savage, who was probably the least appropriate press officer Jim Steinman could have, only because Phil went on to form Savage and Best, which was the PR agency of Britpop and all of that sort of thing. And they kind of became almost as big as the bands themselves. You know, it was a Savage and Best thing or whatever. But I knew Phil, I didn't know him when he was doing that, but I knew him beforehand. And he was lovely. And actually, I say he wasn't the right. He was a tremendous PR for Jim because he's an incredibly empathetic guy. And we'd have these conversations because I was a huge fan of Steinman and Bat Out of Hell since I was a little kid, And so he goes, anyway, Jim's coming in and he's making a video with Ken Russell, right? And you think, fucking hell.
Oh, my God.
Who put those two together? I mean, if you want something to, essentially go wrong, put together Steinman with Ken Russell.
Why didn't they just let off a load of dynamite and just say, there's the video by Ken and Jim
because I think,
with a motorbike and a scantily
because I think Ken, by this point,
and
I'm sure listeners to the pod will remember and know that
readers.
Readers of what? Ken's son Xavier worked with us at Kerrang, so Ken is a sort of a member of the a starry member of the heavy metal community, revered because of the stuff he did. He'd done Tommy,
so over the top.
Yeah, he'd done Tommy.
He did Listomania.
The Devils. I mean, just amazing filmmaker. But I think at the time he was working with Jim, I think it's fair to say he'd burned his bridges in the filmmaking community because all of his films were just these mad Ken Russell visions, so you never knew what you were going to get.
He was basically the Jim Steinman of
cinema. Filmmaking. Yeah, I mean, with Jim, you kind of knew what you were going to get musically, but with Ken, I think it was even more obsessive and
what
baroque.
would have been the ultimate? Freddie Mercury working with Jim Steinman on an album. As videoed by Ken Russell.
I mean, it would just never. I mean, it would have been great, but it would never have come out. But so we go to this. I think it was at Pinewood, and me and Phil went down. And he was taking lots of people. I remember they also took Stephen Wells, the bloke who wrote for
NME.
For NME. He was famously scathing about anything to do with rock. But I think he kind of really liked Jim Steinman. I don't think he liked his music, but I think when he met Jim, he really liked him because it was sort of impossible not to. He was a kind of, by this point he was sort of middle-aged. He'd gone I mean, if you look at the Bat Out of Hell, Bat back of Bat Out of Hell, the original album. There's a picture of Jim and Meat and a girl on that, and Jim's kind of going prematurely grey even when he did Bat.
Oh yeah, he was one of these. He was born grey.
Yeah. So I think by this point, you've got to remember, no one's seen Jim Steinman because he only ever gets up at night. No one's fucking seen Jim for years. And we turn up at Pinewood, and there's this little guy. He's got this biker's jacket on. That I don't know if he got it in Camden Market or something, but some guy's painted all these sort of devils and stuff on it. But he's quite short. He's got this crinkly grey hair that's going everywhere. He's got these eyes that are just like limpid pools. Obviously, Ken Russell is working during the day. So for Jim, this is like staying up all night because he's usually asleep at this. He's asleep at this point.
He's brought his own earth in the coffin though.
But we're at Pinewood and there's loads to do, and the 4 girls are there to do this video. And
Excellent.
It's All Coming Back to Me Now, which later became a big hit.
Was that your phone making?
It's very important news.
Oh really?
That'll be very important news.
Will that be Boris on the phone?
I can't discuss.
Is that Dominic on
I
the
can't.
phone? You're the secret architect behind the sleeves.
I'm the chatty rat, as they say. That's me. I'm going to chatty rat on Steinman. So we're looking and
continue.
Ray Palmer was the photographer, and the photographs that Ray did that day, they're still used. Whenever you see a picture, because he was photographed so rarely, whenever you see a picture of Steinman, he's got that jacket on. If you ever see those pictures of him for Pandora's, in the end he used. The record company was so desperate to get a photo of him, they used the stuff that Ray took on the back of the Pandora's Box album for the PR stuff because they couldn't get anything else.
Madly appropriate that they would use Ray pictures of the all-girl band.
Yeah, so Ray's loving it, obviously, because he's 4 girls. And the girl who sang the song, whose name was Elaine Caswell, was they had like this... it was a bit like a sunbed, but slightly bigger, lit from underneath. Not hot, obviously, but it must have been semi-hot. And she's lying, essentially...
naked?
Well, essentially naked on top of this thing.
Can I just say, essentially naked is better than naked.
Yeah, okay. There's a little bit left to the imagination.
You need
not a lot.
Not a lot. That doesn't work. A little bit works.
So she's lying on this bed, and Ken Russell being Ken Russell, obviously this isn't, nearly insane enough yet. So what does the song "It's All Coming Back to Me Now" say to you? What it said to Ken Russell was, get a load of boa constrictors and put them on top. And Ken Russell, so having described some as this little sort of slightly pudgy, never seen daylight, obviously
that could be Ken you're describing.
Well, and then Ken standing next to him, who has got mad grey hair as well, and is like sort of quite scruffily dressed, but he's obviously in charge of this.
Jim and Ken.
Set, Jim and Ken. So they're inseparable. They've obviously hit it off, and they're inseparable. And Jim would whisper something in Ken's ear, and Ken would go, more boa constrictors. It was insane. So this poor woman's on this bed, and we're all staring at her, basically. And they're going, playback, and you get this fucking...
Was she in the group?
Yeah, she was in the... She was
one of the group?
She sung the song. She was a girl
what was her name?
Elaine Caswell.
Full mark.
Which if you were listening about 30 seconds earlier, I said to you...
Oh, did you?
I said to her, her name was Elaine Caswell. That was her name.
You young people.
Yeah, that was her name. And and then they start... Anyway, so we have lunch, all of this, and it's going on. And they built this set at Pinewood, and Jim's whispering in Ken's ear all at lunchtime. And Ken comes over and he goes, Jim has said what he would like is a bell tower and the actor to ride his motorcycle up the bell tower.
That was it.
And at the climax of the song, he will ride out of the bell tower. And there's all these technicians standing around going, mate, where do you want me to get a bell tower from? We're at Pinewood. So it's
Actually,
madness.
I thought Pinewood would be a good place to get a bell tower.
Probably would.
They make all the movies there, don't they?
It's overrunning like crazy. And Ken Russell said something like...
not over budget as well. Surely not.
Ken Russell goes something like, it's £10,000 an hour to... I can't remember what it was now. £10,000 an hour to keep going. Got to 6 o'clock or whatever. And Steinman just goes, I'll pay. Said, I'll pay. And so we carried on. And then the next day, I think it was the next day, me, him and Phil went to this lunch. We went to a really nice Indian restaurant. I can't remember the name of it. And Steinman, again, I didn't know he did this, but apparently it was very characteristic. When the guy comes over to take the order, he just said, bring me everything. Yeah. I can't decide what I want. Yeah. So we're sitting in this Indian restaurant. You know, they bring it on those trolleys. There's about 5 trolleys worth of stuff. And Steinman's sitting there picking at everything. Oh, I like this, I like that. And you're thinking, and have some of that.
But
you've got your finger, you're putting your fingers
he?
in it, Jim. Oh, have some of that, have some. It was,
and
his
fingernails
nuts.
were long and black like a vampire's, weren't they?
So we had this mad lunch, but it was tremendous. And it was one of those things where the person that you're meeting absolutely lived up to how you wanted them to be.
Yeah.
Having
that's a great story.
Thank
you. Long. But great story.
Oh, I've only just started, buddy. This is like a Steinman song. You get the first 2 choruses.
You think, I like that.
Where
song.
can he possibly go from here?
Somewhere else. That's
well, you just wait.
Yeah, I've often thought of you as a Steinman song.
Yeah.
The story about him ordering everything off the menu and eating with his bare hands, that was a thing. In fact, when I was, I don't know if I ever mentioned, but when I was researching...
Did he say to you, I've just got a dry throat. I've ordered some food. Can you hang on?
I've got a dry throat. I've ordered 24 different mineral waters from around the world. I'm going to have a drink for me.
Yeah.
Could you call me back? No, don't call me back. Wait. That's all right, Jim. I've got some tap water here, which I will also, stick my hand in. You told me that story, a great story. And then when I was doing the book, Bad Out of Hell, Meat Loaf, 2017.
Yes.
Get it now.
Definitive.
And of course, researching it, I found countless stories right up till like 2013 or something, where someone from LA Weekly goes to interview him. And it's almost the same story, except it's not an Indian restaurant.
Yeah. Mexican or something.
Any restaurant, he just would order the entire menu.
Yeah. And it goes to that thing that Meat Loaf was saying about, he was slightly gluttonous, for everything.
Completely.
Yeah.
More choruses, more middle eights.
Exactly, yeah.
He also worked really, really well with female vocalists.
Well, I think the thing to say, and I was thinking this...
Ogres and princesses.
Yeah. Well, that's absolutely right. I think there's a couple of things to say about that. One is that in Steinman's songs, women are revered, which is a big flip from rock music at the time.
Revered, but kind of put on a pedestal.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Revered.
And
that's what
means.
Of
archetypal.
Well, they sort of are, yeah. I mean, I think he's trapped in this very teenage vision of the world. I think his development in the very best way is arrested in that fevered teenage imagination. And you're absolutely right about the ogres and princesses. Jim's music, in many ways, this will sound odd, but is for and about losers on the male side. That's what it is, fantasy and losers.
Because he was the ultimate kind of nerd, because his background was East Coast elite, he was privately educated.
Yes.
He was writing his own symphonies and musicals as a teenager.
In college, yeah. A prodigy, yeah.
So, no luck with women, let's be fair, at this point. And so much of his songs and the fantasy element, this is what I meant by putting on a pedestal.
Yeah, revered.
That's what you meant. What I meant was not just putting on a pedestal, but mythologizing, so that each woman would be young and beautiful. And, with the long flight.
Yeah,
I mean, like with Bonnie Tyler, he talked about in the video for that. She epitomised this archetype he'd had in his head forever of kind of like an angel in hell, which would be this dark stage, suddenly this bright white light on this almost kind of virginal yet voluptuous young woman in a white floaty dress and hair. And real kind of fairy tale stuff.
Yes.
Very much not so. Robin Hood, Red Riding Hood.
Yeah. And
Big Bad Wolf.
Peter Pan, which he was obsessed with.
From
an early. I mean, I think you're talking about his early college years, and he comes out of college and then hooks up with this guy Joseph Papp, which is just the most fantastic name. If you were inventing a name for a producer of schlocky musicals, rock operas in the early 1970s, Joseph Papp is your man. And
but
I think
was also, he had a serious side too. He had that melodrama that Jim had. He used to do Shakespeare in the Park.
Shakespeare in the Park, yeah, which is where Jim and Steinman at this point writes, and I think this is one of the things I kind of really quite worked up about it. I thought, I really want to say this.
You say it, John.
This
is your platform,
the key
mate.
song.
Feel free.
The absolute.
Speak freely.
I will.
Get it out, mate.
The key song in the Steinman canon is More Than You Deserve.
Ooh,
which is
a bold statement.
Well, it's a song he writes very, very early. I mean, it's one of the first songs he writes. And it becomes the title of his first musical that Meat Loaf appears in. And Meat Loaf plays the character Rabbit in this musical. And actually, on YouTube, if you Google More Than You Deserve, 1974, you can hear Meat Loaf sing the song in the stage production. And it's just completely raw. You'll hear how amazing Meat Loaf's voice was as a young man. Absolutely tremendous performance. And it has this completely spontaneous standing ovation at the end of it. So obviously someone in the crowd's just taped it. It's an amazing moment, really worth listening to. But this song, More Than You Deserve, has all of Steinman's tropes contained within it. It's almost like the big bang of Steinman songs, because it's about a guy who is betrayed by his girlfriend. And
i.e. betrayed by life. Yeah,
but again, he reveres the girlfriend. And with Steinman's sort of terrific wordplay, the lyric goes, "Won't you take some more, boy?" He catches a guy with his girlfriend. "Won't you take some more, boy? It's more than you deserve." I.e., still revering the woman who's betrayed him. She's more than you deserve. It ends up, she's. Then I saw you making love to a group of my best friends. So I looked them all in the eye and I said, "Won't you take some more? It's what you came for."
And I said,
"Won't you take some more? It's what you came for." And it's brilliant. I mean, when Meat Loaf sings that bit, it's so good. It's so good. But More Than You Deserve, I mean, essentially everything Steinman later has to say, he says in More Than You Deserve. He just finds different and in lots of ways better ways of saying
that's
it.
The same
but that's
with many great writers.
It is actually they're constantly driving at this one thing that obsesses them,
which
and
is
they try and say it in as many ways as they can.
Inside that has churned out the good stuff.
Absolutely right, and it does. And Steinman does it again and again.
But the thing also I think about Steinman and Meat Loaf, which people didn't get initially, because it wasn't, they came out on this budget label, Bad Out of Hell did, they couldn't get a deal anywhere. There's been years and years in the making, which we can mention in a minute. But when they finally come out, of course it's now one of the biggest selling albums of all time, but it wasn't when it first came out. It took a long time because there's no social media, there's no MTV. And then on those few occasions where they do put him on a television camera, people are audible gasps
Well,
as the monster is led on stage.
This goes to the thing of Steinman, and Steinman's songs only, I mean, I know later he's recorded by Barbra Streisand, by Celine Dion. Those songs never really work when they sing them, because it's that kind of really odd thing of you're saying dragging the monster on stage is perfect. Jim chooses to sing his songs, this 300-pound loser from Texas. And, your book actually, which I have read, brilliantly paints the portrait of Meat Loaf as a young man and what he was like at school, and essentially an outcast, hugely overweight, can't really find a place, hugely overweight, and you would normally make him the guy in the football team, but he doesn't want to be that, he wants to be on stage. So, and Jim later in his career, he finds Bonnie Tyler, a washed up one-hit wonder,
from Wales.
Yeah, from Wales. It's all coming, Air Supply, who he gives Making Love Out of Nothing at All to. A couple of wet blanket Australians, who he gives that song to. When he comes to make It's All Coming Back to Me Now, I Would Do Anything for Love. Who duets with Meat Loaf? Some female club singer, Mrs. Loud, that he finds somewhere in the north of England. It's constant, again with Steinman, rubbing away at the same thing.
Rubbing away at the same thing, but there's another layer, which is, okay, it's the loser, the monster, the guy who can't get the girl. except the guy gets the girl. So there are duets.
Yes, yes.
With Ellen
Foley,
Ellen Foley was amazing.
Yeah, oh, fantastic,
amazing.
Singer. I mean,
and then the big breakthrough TV appearance in the UK was the Old Grey Whistle Test, where they showed it wasn't in the studio. They just showed a live clip or a clip that was filmed of Meat Loaf, and I've forgotten her name. The woman that did the live.
Oh, was
tour.
it Patty Russo?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm saying it.
Or I think there might have been someone before Patty Russo.
That,
yeah.
Anyway,
and there was always a back and forth between her and Ellen Foley because everyone thought because she did the live show she'd sung it on the album.
But she hadn't. No,
she hadn't. But Ellen Foley sang it. On the
here's the thing: is there comes a moment in this clip where Meat Loaf has to do this big stage kiss with the female singer
in Paradise by the Dashboard Light. Yeah,
and they really, I mean, they get hold of each other, and it's like he's like a crocodile devouring a rabbit.
Yeah, thirsty man at the waterhole.
He's got hold of her, mate, and he's not letting go. But she is also kind of surrendering to the moment as well. And I tell you what, these days it sounds so innocent, but I remember watching that in like 1978, and I think my jaw literally fell over
the floor. Yeah.
What the fuck?
Well, that was my.
But that was this dynamic, and he kept that going. You know, with Dead Ringer for Love. You know, Cher comes in. That she's even in the video. I'd Do Anything for Love has the female.
And actually, it's worth saying also that Cher was at a low point when she did that. I mean, it was before her big comeback.
No, absolutely.
In the mid '80s.
Exactly. Hey, Cher, would you like to do a video with this guy?
Well, yeah, but I mean, he was big.
But he just sold 10 million.
Yes,
I'll
exactly.
do that.
Yeah. But I mean, it goes. But the first time I heard "Bat Out of Hell,"
Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, it just this extraordinary record that doesn't sound like anything else. Actually, it later transpires what it does sound a bit like is "Born to Run" by Bruce Springsteen because a lot of the same musicians are on the album. Roy Batam's playing the piano, Max Weinberg's playing the drums. The sort of the third wheel for Bat was obviously Todd Rundgren, who comes in, who's like this amazing genius who produced it, played on it, and was basically just having fun. I mean, it wasn't Todd's cup of tea in the slightest.
No, although Todd himself, with his group Utopia, was also in the mid to late 70s, was also, Utopia was this ostensibly a progressive rock group, but who dealt in these kind of epically layered production numbers, so it wasn't a million.
Not a million, no. But I suppose what I mean, it wasn't his sensibility. It wasn't Rundgren's sensibility particularly, but he just does it so brilliantly. You know, there's that great thing about Steinman saying, "Oh, Todd, can you make your guitar sound like a motorcycle?"
Yeah,
and Rundgren just does it because he's a genius. You know, of course he can do it.
And apparently, him and Jim, Rundgren and Steinman, really kind of buddied up while they were making Bat Out of Hell.
Yeah.
And Meat Loaf had the most miserable time because he wasn't part of the team.
But then
he hadn't written the songs, he wasn't producing them.
But really, you can see almost that's a Steinman ploy because, again, it casts Meat as the outsider and he gets these tremendous performances out of him because he's cast him out. You know, he's brought him in and cast him out. And I really think that was very probably a ploy on Steinman's part. He would know, because if you look at the interplay between Meat and Jim throughout their lives, they make this whole. You know, when you fit them together, they become this one thing, and they both know that. But they're constantly fighting with one another.
Because I think people rail against that thing that everybody sees and thinks is marvellous and obvious.
Yeah.
To the people involved, it can feel like a trap. It
can
feel confining.
Yeah. And also, what part you then get that great sort of crisis of identity where you go, well, what part of me is this? And especially with Meat Loaf himself, because as he said, as he always said, the other reason his interpretations of Steinman's songs were so much better than, for example, Barbra Streisand, who's obviously a better singer, is that Meat Loaf inhabited the songs. He was a loser. He got what it meant. He understood the songs on a very, very deep level. And I think that's what Steinman also understood about Meat. And about Bonnie. I mean, I remember I'm going
to differ with you slightly on
Jump
this.
in.
I don't think Steinman had it that worked out because he had worked with other singers.
He's got a coterie of singers that he would work with.
I mean, before the fame. And from my memory of writing the book, there is a moment where Steinman is working with other singers that are better. Almost everybody was better looking in those days than Meat Loaf because he was enormous still. But then Meat Loaf comes in, and that voice, and I think what you're talking about now definitely comes into play. The voice, the persona, the fact that he was this grotesque, as it were. I think Jim did, on not just on a conscious level, but I think on kind of just went,
a subconscious level. This is what I've been waiting for.
Because Meat Loaf's memory, this is something Meat Loaf told me, the day he met Steinman, he said he came in, it's just him and Steinman with a piano in the room. He said, and Steinman came in wearing gloves. He said, and then he did that thing, like a stripper, one finger at a time, taking the gloves off. And he got the gloves off, and underneath were more gloves. And then he played the... And Steinman said the minute Meat Loaf started to sing, he said the piano began to shake slightly.
Wow, yeah.
Because he had that voice.
That voice was... I mean, again, listen to that, him singing More Than You Deserve, and you'll hear how powerful
he had
it
a
is.
fantastic
And it all ends after Bat Out of Hell for that, stress or whatever it was, the amount of shows they did. His voice goes, and it never quite comes back to what it was in those early days.
Well, again, people forget it was the 70s, and these sort of 2-year world tours weren't a thing. I mean, there just weren't that many places that you could book a concert in those days. Britain, parts of Europe, America. If you were mega, maybe Japan, maybe Australia. But even groups like The Who only went to Australia once.
And as you say, they weren't mega at that point.
Not at all.
Not at the start of the tour.
Complete unknown.
Yeah. Jim, the man who won't go anywhere, actually goes on tour the first time.
He's the keyboard player.
Plays the piano. Yeah.
But walks out on the tour at a certain juncture. And I heard it was after the Australian shows, because there were countless interviews where the two of them are sitting there. And you and I have been in this situation. Yeah. And, of course, all the questions are going to Meat. Yeah. Because it's a record by Meat Loaf. Yeah. Here is Meat Loaf. He sings the songs.
Yeah.
He's the other... What is
Who's
the
other guy? Yeah.
Oh, he plays piano.
Well, you look on the album Songs by Jim Steinman. That's all it says.
Well, that's kind of an inconvenient truth, isn't it?
Yeah.
The first time I ever saw a Meat Loaf... to finish that story. So Steinman gets the fucking hump. Why is no one talking to me? And then there's some story, some excuse, some reason why he has to go home. But basically that's it. He never performs with Meat Loaf again. And here we have, you get the meeting of the giants, you got the meeting of the losers, because Meat Loaf, the grotesque, with no songwriting talent whatsoever, but this nothing except the voice, is this literally and metaphorically huge star. And here is Steinman, the kind of genius of the group, and no one knows or cares. It's I know it says
but what does that actually mean?
But who cares? Because he's Meat Loaf, and he's big and ugly, and that's a story.
You're right, and here's the quandary that goes through the rest of their lives. They're constantly battling back and forth to the point where I think when the musical comes out, when Bat Out of Hell, the musical comes out, Meat Loaf isn't mentioned at all.
It just says Jim Steinman.
It's just Jim Steinman's Bat Out of Hell, and it's almost as if Meat Loaf, the entity, has receded so far by that point.
And the sad irony, and that's how my book ends, because it came out around that time, was at the premiere in London, Meat Loaf was there, even though his name is nowhere to be seen. And Steinman isn't there, even though his name is everywhere to be seen. Right up to the very end, they're still somehow dysfunctional. Yeah. But it's that dysfunction that
makes them work. Yeah, because after Bat, Jim writes a whole other album, first of all, after Bat, that he loses. He lost, didn't he? He used to carry it around in a plastic bag. And he always said he'd written this amazing... I think it was 2 or 3 amazing songs that he somehow lost, and he could never get them back, and it drove him insane. He couldn't remember what, because I remember interviewing him, and his wordplay was always terrific. That was the great pleasure of his lyrics, is the wordplay and the little reverses and tricks. And he would just, when we were talking, would quote bits of Original Sin, which was the record he'd done at the time. I've been looking for an original sin, one with a twist and a bit of a spin. You think, yeah, Vince Neil ain't going to write that. That's a bit too good for them. And he'd lost this thing and it drove him crazy. Then he writes Bad for Good, which Meat Loaf can't sing because he's hanging upside down drinking urine or whatever it was.
Meat Loaf, they say Meat Loaf has lost his voice. Yeah. And the more as the years go by, the more I think that has to have been completely psychological damage.
Yeah.
He is so fucked up at this point, at the end of the Bat Out of Hell 2-year extravaganza, whatever it was. He can't sing.
Yeah.
Because that Bad for Good album, for me, would have been the perfect follow-up to Bat Out of Hell. Yeah. Because every single... and some of those songs do resurface
he plundered.
Later
this is the other thing about Jim.
On Meat Loaf albums and others.
He plunders his back catalogue constantly. Not only that, Little Melodies, when you listen... talking about More Than You Deserve, little melodies in that occur in other songs. And he does that constantly.
Or even lines like in Total Eclipse of the Heart, which again was ostensibly written for Meat Loaf.
Yeah.
But ends up going to this complete unknown called Bonnie Tyler. That... Turn around, bright eyes. Now that's in that was in lots of previous.
Yeah, that's right. It is. You're right.
And then turns up years later and I can't remember, but probably Bat 3 or something.
Yeah, he reprises it. He does that a lot, and I think that's a very kind of. It's a sort of classical composer thing, isn't it? The constant rephrasing of ideas. Steinman does that a lot. So Jim decides he says he sang Bad for Good. If you look at the very, very small print, so one of my favourite of his songs, Surf's Up, is on Bad for Good. And Surf's Up and So Am I, one of his great...
he was capable of poetry, but also capable of smutty jokes.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And Rory Dodd sings that. But, you have to look deep in the small print to see that that's not Jim.
Yeah.
Because their voices are in a similar register. Rory Dodd's a way better singer, so obviously he takes on Surf's Up.
And Rory Dodd was part of that sort of coterie that also sang on Bat Out of Hell.
Oh, as the background. Absolutely.
Also sang on Dead Ringer.
Dead Ringer, yeah, that's right. And demos, if in the depths of YouTube, find a lot of Steinman songs are demoed by Rory Dodd.
Around the same period, 79, 80, I worked with the guy I was in partnership at the time in a PR company. We had an artist called Danny Peyronel, who had been the keyboard player. His claim to fame was he'd been the keyboard player in UFO for a couple of albums.
I thought you said a couple of hours.
No,
it felt
like a couple.
Very UFO.
It was like he was in UFO for 2 albums, and every time you ever spoke to him, it would come up. One of those. Yeah. And he was from South America, and his family was very well off, and he just was one of these guys who, he'd had that moment of fame in UFO, and now he was going to be the new Billy Joel or something, like keyboard player and singer. And he kept coming up with these songs, and Joe thought they were amazing. I thought, and then he came in one day with this brand new, just got back from New York, and he had this new tape he played us. It was fucking brilliant. Just one thing. I'm going, it sounds like Meat Loaf, doesn't it? And he'd been in New York, and because he had money, he'd hired Rory Dodd and all the kind of people that had worked on that project to now do all the vocal melodies. And it was like the angels came down from the sky to sing. It was so good, but it was very much,
Yeah.
I would do. It was really like, Daddy, this is amazing. It's just a shame Meat Loaf's already done it 50 times.
Yeah.
But hey.
Yeah. But here's the thing, and then.
But Rory had that whole thing.
Oh, Rory, yeah. And then I think Dead Ringer, especially, is, the backing vocals on Dead Ringer, absolutely superb. Steinman really, the arrangements of the songs, I'm Gonna Love Her for Both of Us, More Than You Deserve, Read 'Em and Weep, and actually probably my favourite Meat Loaf song of all, I'll Kill You If You Don't Come Back. Yeah. It's amazing song which has this kind of bog standard first 4 minutes and then goes into this beautiful coda where Steinman sort of reaches for one of his, I always call them his list songs, where he starts going, you know, he'll take a theme and he'll use it over and over. And the guitarist on that is Davy Jones. Who's it? Davy Johnson, the guy, Elton John's guitarist.
Great guitarist.
He plays this beautiful little bit of guitar all over this, and it's all about the girls who never get a date. It's like, bless all the girls who are always alone. They kneel down in prayer and they wait up by the phone. And you think, yeah, that's so good. You know?
That's so good. But that's clearly autobiographical.
Yeah, it is. I mean, Jim's constantly writing about himself. That's what, you know, Meat Loaf is him.
Let's talk about...
Sorry, all I was going to say really quickly was he does Dead, and then it all falls apart. Meat and Jim split for years and years and years. And Meat makes a series. And here you see, with the dual personality, who does what. Because Meat makes a series of terrible records, and he has no discernment at all in the choice of material he makes, something that continues throughout his career.
It's all kind of sub-Steinman, isn't it?
It is. It's either people trying to write
epic...
songs that are like Jim Steinman, which just don't do it, you know, because you can't, because it's not Jim. The only one who ever got close was Desmond Child. He wrote a song called Blind as a Bat, which is on a later Meat Loaf album, which is really good. And when I first heard it, I thought, fuck, that's Jim. But it wasn't. It was Desmond Child.
I think Desmond
Jim.
Was probably very influenced.
Yeah, probably,
but
yeah.
Who was Steinman influenced by? And I'm going to start you off here by saying one of the things he told me was... it's such an interesting, so obvious when you think about it, but he said he, as a kid, he was obsessed with those girl groups like the Shangri-Las.
Right.
Leader of the Pack.
All the Phil Spector stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if Phil did Leader of the Pack, but I think it was Shadow Morton did that. But his point was they were girls, but they weren't like good girls like the Ronettes.
They were bad girls.
Leader of the Pack.
Yeah.
You know, where the guy dies at the end. You hear the revving motorbike. Yeah. He said he loved all that. And he had this idea he always had this idea that he'd love to form the ultimate kind of bad girl. Bad girl group. But musically, he drew more inspiration from the Phil Spector productions, which is where I think the overlap with Born to Run comes from, because that's clearly an homage to Phil Spector, that full spectrum sound, which Springsteen didn't have on the first two albums.
No, not at all. No.
But Steinman went further back than Spector to the great Bernard Herrmann, who was this gothic film music composer that did all the Hitchcock movies.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. Dun 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 dun.
That's very, very Steinman. Yeah,
and the birds. Or what's it?
Psycho.
Dun dun dun. Yeah. Herman was a genius.
Yeah.
And the first person I ever heard about Meat Loaf from was Sandy Robertson.
Yeah, of course. He was the guy who'd write about Meat Loaf at that point.
He was about the only music critic in the UK that wrote about Meat Loaf. And everybody was like, because it was the height of punk as well.
Yeah.
The height of punk. We've got a 300-pound gorilla singing 10-minute tracks on a 7-track album.
Yeah.
Epics. What the fuck? Almost David Lynch territory before we knew about David Lynch.
Yeah.
You know? This is crap. This is everything that
we hate.
Yeah. And yet it keeps selling. Every track becomes a single and a hit somewhere in the world. And I happened to be sharing a flat with Sandy, and he'd be playing this, and I'd literally be going, "What is this shit?" And he would just tell me more and more and more about it. And it was Sandy that made the Bernard Herrmann connection. And it was Sandy that became a big friend of Steinman's.
Yeah.
So they would talk on the phone, and he'd be telling me all this funny stuff that this guy had said. But I didn't know who Jim Steinman was,
right.
other than he had written songs for Meat Loaf. But then a year or two later, Sandy wrote a book, a Meat Loaf book. It was for Omnibus, which is fan-type books, lots of pictures. I mean, like really thin.
Yeah.
I've got it in the other room somewhere. About 30,000 words, if that, 20,000 and pictures. And he called the book The Phenomenology of Excess.
Oh, that's a good title.
And when I spoke to Steinman, I was trying to persuade him to do his autobiography.
Right.
And he goes, do you know, the only thing that's ever stopped me doing an autobiography is that I could never come up with a better title
than that.
Than The Phenomenology of Excess.
Yeah, that's...
But in that book was a chapter on Bernard Herrmann. And Steinman said to Sandy, you're the only person that's ever made that connection.
Wow.
But I worshipped Bernard Herrmann. Yeah. He was my guiding star because it was completely gothic, completely over the top, but really effective, really effective. He could make music that imitated life, you know, but scary life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was a bit like, I mean, I suppose one of the overlooked parts of Steinman's career was when he reinvents the Sisters of Mercy, who are like this kind of dreary goth band, you know, with, again, ambitions of grandeur, delusions of grandeur. But Steinman gives them this corrosion, you know, and it's amazing. It just sounds like, you know, it's like, or I can't remember if it's This Corrosion or Dominion, which starts with that line, 25 whores in the room next door, 25 whores and I want more. Oh, no, it's more, isn't it? Sorry. So, but Steinman produces this whole album for them, which does sound like, boom, boom, you know, like you were describing, gothic, but massive. And then gets hired to produce Def Leppard, which is one of the few damp squibs. So I think you should...
Okay.
Because he was obsessed with this fucking Def Leppard thing, Steinman. It really got to him, didn't it?
What, the fact that
they'd essentially fired him, yeah.
Well, Joe Elliott, the singer of Def Leppard, who I've asked about this on a few different occasions, he said that the thing was we'd be working, you know.
Well, she said it was for Hysteria, wasn't it? It was the early part.
The album that became Hysteria.
The album that became
because
Hysteria.
Mutt Lange had already said, I'm done.
Yeah.
I've done 2 albums with you. That was sort of Mutt's limit in those days. Well, 2 or 3 was his limit.
Well, he was off on something else, wasn't he? He got, because Lang took so long, he got hired for hired for years. You know, if you booked Mutt Lange, you had him for donkey's years. Yeah,
yeah, he needs another 6 months. He needs another 6 months. And the album was cursed. You know, I mean, then Rick loses his arm and blah blah blah. But for a while, they're working in Ireland because it's a tax dodge, and Steinman is there. And Joe goes, you know, it's a really big, important album for us because Pyromania was mega in America, but nowhere else, not even Britain. So this was going to be the one that put them over the top everywhere if they could deliver it. And Joe would be like, we're working on this guy. Jim, what do you think? Jim. And he'd be in the control room reading the paper.
Yeah, but this is...
well, let me tell you my theory on this, and then you'll jump in.
Good.
I couldn't help wondering if Jim Steinman, that this wasn't mighty enough to interest him over a long, extended period, because, I mean, it should have been. I mean, Hysteria becomes, I think... one of the greatest.
Oh, it's a
masterpiece.
It's a masterpiece of production, without a doubt.
It's the production really that is the masterpiece aspect of that album. Steinman has his opportunity, but he doesn't deliver because he's not really a producer.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is here's the thing: Todd Rundgren produces Bat Out of Hell. Steinman, I don't think he produced Bad for Good. He certainly didn't produce Dead Ringer. So of the three, I don't know. Did he ever produce it? Yeah, he didn't produce Total Eclipse of the Heart. So I just think it was an odd choice from Def Leppard, and it really, I mean, it got to Steinman to the point. So I remember him saying, when I was speaking to him, he goes, I was asking him just. You know, you wouldn't you? I mean, Def Leppard at that point were one of the biggest bands in the world. Hysteria was one of the biggest albums in the world.
Where did it all go wrong?
Yeah. And he said, he goes, I knew it all went wrong when Joe Elliott said to me, I went to the cinema last night, and Jim said, oh, did you? What did you go and see? And he said, Joe Elliott said to me, I went to see Police Academy 4. And Steinman's kind of outraged by this, you know, and he goes, oh, and tell me, Joe, was it any good? And Joe Elliott said to me, oh, yes, it was way better than Police Academy 3. and Steinman's he's outraged by every part of that discussion is to him an insult in the face of cinema, comedy, anything.
So it was beneath him.
I think he felt not probably intellectually wrong, but yeah, it was beneath him. I don't think Leppard are an amazing group, but Steinman's fired by this vision. And he works best when it's his vision. And if he'd sat down and gone, okay, Def Leppard, I've written these songs. These are what we're going to do. It wouldn't have sounded anything like Def Leppard. It might have been amazing. Who knows? But I think it would have engaged him. But I think you're absolutely right. Given that it was their songs, they didn't really know what they...
they were the wrong group for him, and he was definitely the wrong producer for them.
when you see there's a classic albums programme on the making of Hysteria, and when you see how painstaking everything Mutt Lange did was, and how the songs were pieced together, and Phil Collins saying, well, I had a few notes here that he liked and a few notes, and so we did this and we did that, and over the course of years they turned into songs. So Steinman's a composer. He's not going to fucking stand for that.
Well, he's Beethoven, isn't he?
He's got music flying out of his asshole, as they say. He's not going to take 6 months to write a fucking Pour Some Sugar on Me.
Nevertheless,
that's not to decry Def Leppard, which, as I say, I reiterate, Hysteria is a fantastic record.
Who would he have, apart from Meat Loaf? Who would he have been good?
Well, I think only. I remember Jeff Barton calling me over one day and giving me some big spiel and saying, he goes, right, you're going to interview Bonnie Tyler. And I'm amazed he even put her in Kerrang, because this is like way after Total Eclipse. Again, she's not got a Jim Steinman song to sing. There's no Holding Out for a Hero.
Holding Out for a Hero?
Yeah, he did. She'd already done that. This is way later. He goes, go to Wales. You had to go to Wales to interview her. She was in some really posh hotel. She obviously had money, I interviewed her in this hotel room in Wales. And Barton was trying to sell it. It was a bit like when Del Boy used to interview Anne Wilson, who was his kind of ultimate sort of icon or whatever.
I picked this one especially for you.
Yeah, I kept this one especially for you. So I got to interview Bonnie Tyler. I'm Smith, she was like a kind of, I'd say she's a bit like a sort of hot school teacher.
I think the word you're looking for is MILF. Yeah. Were you MILF'd up going to interview Bonnie?
And I don't think
just a boy
and she
from
was like, oh, would you like a cup of tea? She was like giving me tea. She was.
I didn't know she was from Calcutta. What did she say again?
Oh God! And I must have written this absolutely in a Welsh accent. She said, "Oh, would you?"
Go on. Let's have that again.
I can't do it.
Of course you can. Go on.
Would you like a cup of tea, boy?
That's with your curry.
With Jim's curry, back to Jim eating the curry. But again, the one thing I do remember is she revered Steinman, absolutely revered him.
Yeah. He, as we mentioned, he had his ups and downs. Pandora's Box, shoulda, woulda,
massive
coulda,
flopola,
but
massive
total
flopola.
flop.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was because it was hyped so badly, because some of those songs, A, were magnificent, and B, became enormous hits. It's All Coming Back to Me Now, which was a huge record for, I think, Celine Dion.
Yeah.
That was Pandora's Box,
Yeah, it was,
wasn't it?
It's All Come Back to Me Now. Original Sin is on that, which Meat Loaf later did. Safe Sex, which is a really great song. There's no such thing as safe sex when it comes to loving you. Another classic little Steinman reverse. That's it. That Meat Loaf does that. A couple of other people did that. Loads of great songs on that record.
Now, he and Meat Loaf also had this dreadful dysfunctional relationship that went beyond the music, the performing. They were arguing about, they went to court and argued about money over who's that. Because Jim told me, this is in 2006, so what's that, nearly 30 years after the album's out. And it reminded me a bit of when Ronnie James Dio used to talk about Rainbow, how it should not, it came out as Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, but it should have really been Ritchie Blackmore and Ronnie James Dio's Rainbow. Yeah. Jim said on the original cover to Meat Loaf, it was by Meat Loaf and Jim Steinman.
That's right, it was, yeah.
And he seemed to have a memory of being in the studio when Meat Loaf got a phone call I was like, that's okay. I know. Yeah, fucking manager. And the next thing, Jim's name wasn't on the album, and the record company going, it's just easy to sell.
On the back, it says songs by Jim Steinman,
which I think was an addendum.
Yeah, which I was going to say, I think was later, in later editions, was even upgraded to the front of the album.
To appease Jim, there was because by now they're thinking, well, we've got to need another album.
Because there was this idea that people wouldn't be able to grasp the fact that, because Meat Loaf was such a weird name, and it was pertaining to a person rather than a band. I think there was an idea that people, if you then added in Meat Loaf and Jim Steinman, it would be so confusing.
Well, it'd be like saying the Rolling Stones and Mick Jagger.
It's a bit like this. It's a bit like this podcast, which says "Getcha Rocks Off" with Mick Wall.
Yeah, see, that's correct.
It ends.
See, now if they'd just done "Bat Out of Hell" by Meat Loaf with Meat Loaf, that would no, you can't. No, that would make a lot of sense.
A lot of sense
from a commercial point of view.
You know what I just thought of, which was before we close. I'm sure we're getting close to the edge.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember? I remember when you were doing your Meat Loaf book, and we were laughing about this bloke, and I was trying to think of his name on the way over, and I've just remembered it, and I'm going to say it now: Steve Steinman.
Oh God.
Do you remember him? He does the Meat Loaf shows. Steve Steinman.
He looked
it's
great.
amazing.
I tried to interview him for the book, but I couldn't find an email.
Yeah.
There was just some website selling tickets for
like,
show next year.
He basically does versions of Steinman songs, and he cashed in on the fact Meat Loaf couldn't tour anymore and all the rest. So before Bat Out of Hell was a musical, he was essentially doing that, but also doing all the other Steinman songs as well.
And he was good.
And half-inching his... He's really good.
Didn't he have girls in the group?
Yeah, he did. He's on YouTube. Well, he has girls to do the... Because in the show the show is Total Eclipse of the Heart and all that.
Does he do the snogging?
I don't know if he does the snogging.
Of course he does. You've got to be artistically pure.
But Steve Steinman. And I always thought I'd love Jim to have seen it.
I'm sure you told me about it, or I told you.
I just remember us laughing about and sending the videos to each other.
But I remember saying to you, and I can't remember if this is the actuality, but in so many words, he's doing Coventry next month. Let's go? Let's
go. And we wanted to go, didn't we?
Yeah.
I'd go if he does it again.
Yeah. Steve Steinman, if you're listening.
Steve, if you're listening, give us a call, buddy. We want
to come and see the show.
We want to talk.
Okay, well, we're in pandemic bullshit.
When you go back to doing shows. Or come here and do a show. Come and do a show in the... we're not actually here.
No,
don't come round. Let's not go... don't come round.
There's a reason I have an electric barrier at the front of my house.
We are both a bit like Steinman in that we don't like people coming round.
Right, John, we are out of time, sadly. But how will Jim be remembered? Because sorry, I put that the wrong way round. Before I ask that question, one of the sadnesses, the little things you noticed when he died and the obits came out, it kind of had to tell people who he was and then why they should care that he died. And it just didn't capture
him at all. And I think, you're right. And they all used that quote from Steinman, which he'd given once, where he talked about his songs and he says, well, they're extreme, they're over the top. And he ended up by saying, and silly. And he said that, and you kind of know how he meant it, but the only reason Steinman... Yeah, exactly. That's the only reason that they do work. And I think there's that slight kind of... it's only Jim Steinman. Patronising.
Meat Loaf.
The great thing...
He's not as great as Liam Gallagher.
Exactly, yeah. The great... Yeah, I mean, as if Oasis are fit to inhabit the same planet,
Exactly.
And it's... and I think there is a little bit of that in all of the coverage of Steinman. But I just think he was a complete one-off. Complete one-off in everything he did. And his music should mean as much to people as any other great artist.
Even more so, in my opinion, than most of what we consider to be great artists, because it incredibly intelligent, brilliantly crafted, fearless.
Yeah.
Fearless.
Yeah. And I would say not silly, but funny in part. Yeah, definitely.
Great, but a great high level of humour.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's like saying Curb Your Enthusiasm is silly. Well, you could say that, but
yeah,
you're not really capturing what
it
so
is.
great.
Yeah.
It's a very heightened It's an acute,
it's a really good point. It's a good
really
comparison.
high level that not everybody gets. But if you do get it, there's no going back.
You get it, yeah. Godspeed, Jim.
Yeah, God bless you, Jim.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave us a review, share it with a friend, or plain old subscribe wherever you listen to it. To get you some conversation online, follow us on Twitter at GetchaPod. Until next time.
This has been a No Filter Media production.
Say what you want.